Welcome back to Revise and Resubmit, the podcast that takes, those really dense academic papers and makes them surprisingly interesting. I'm Pavlov.
And I'm Nikita. We're kicking off today looking at some really interesting cutting-edge research.
Yes, and this paper we're about to explore, it's actually part of the session readings for the virtual summer school in Entrepreneurship Research 2025.
That's right, and it's quite something. 2025 will be the 5th year for this summer school. It started back in 2021, completely no fee.
Which is amazing. Think about it, 5 sessions, each digging into 4 different papers, sometimes book reviews too. It's a really valuable resource.
It really is. And, we definitely need to give a shout out to the organizers, Professor Vishal K. Gupta and PhD candidate Athena Skidopoulou, both from the University of Alabama.
Absolutely. Huge thanks to them for spearheading such a unique and frankly needed initiative in the entrepreneurship research community.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, so for our listeners, you're here to get smart fast, right?
Yeah.
We're diving into a paper today that honestly throws a bit of a curveball.
Uh-huh.
We're talking investor intuition, that gut feeling, and its, surprising link to gender equality in reward-based crowdfunding.
And what's immediately fascinating, as you said, is that contrast. In traditional funding markets, we know there's a gender gap.
Yeah.
It's pretty well established.
Persistent.
But then you look at reward-based crowdfunding, and suddenly women are doing just as well as men, sometimes even better, across different sectors, different cultures even.
So that's the puzzle, isn't it? Why the difference? What's going on in crowdfunding?
Exactly. And that's our mission for this deep dive.
Yeah.
Figuring out the mechanisms behind this gender equality in crowdfunding, and especially the unexpected role intuition plays, based on this 2024 research by Fellnhofer and Deng.
Okay, let's get into it then. What's the sort of headline finding that jumps out from their work?
Well, the really striking thing, and maybe a bit counterintuitive, is how the research pushes back against the common idea that intuition is, just a vehicle for bias in finance.
Right. You'd almost assume gut feelings would just reinforce existing stereotypes.
You would think. But this work suggests the opposite, that women's success in crowdfunding is actually linked to investors using their intuition. And that intuition doesn't seem inherently biased gender-wise.
Okay, wow. And how did they figure this out? It wasn't just theory, right?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
They conducted 3 separate randomized controlled experiments, really robust methodology.
3? Yeah.
Yeah, with over 2,900 participants pooled from Europe and the US. And the analysis across these studies points towards what they term a gender equality effect that's connected to using intuition in these investment choices.
So the quick takeaway is whether someone says they're intuitive or whether they act intuitively by deciding fast.
Exactly.
Neither of those things in this crowdfunding context seems to reliably lead them to favor male or female founders.
That's what the data suggests. It's quite compelling.
So how did they, measure intuition? It seems a bit fuzzy.
Good question. They tackled it in 2 complementary ways, which is smart. First, they use self-reports. There's a standard questionnaire called the Rational Experiential Inventory, the REI.
REI, okay.
Yeah. It basically gauges whether people tend to rely more on logical analysis or on their feelings and instincts when making decisions generally.
Got it. So asking people about their style. And the second way?
The second way was behavioral. They looked at how quickly people made investment decisions when shown actual real-world crowdfunding project descriptions.
Ah, clever. The idea being that a faster decision is more likely driven by that immediate intuitive hit.
Precisely. Less time for slow, deliberate analysis, more reliance on the gut feel.
Okay, so they have these 2 measures, self-reported style and actual decision speed. What did the analysis show when they put it all together?
Well, across the 3 studies, the Bayesian analysis showed pretty consistently that there wasn't a reliable interaction effect between intuition, whether self-reported via REI or measured by decision speed, and the gender of the project founder when predicting willingness to invest.
Hold on, break that down a bit. No reliable interaction effect means?
It means that using intuition didn't systematically change whether someone preferred male or female founders. Even if, in a particular study or context, there was an overall slight preference for one gender. Turning up the intuition dial, so to speak, didn't reliably amplify or reverse that preference. The intuitive response seems somewhat independent of that potential baseline gender bias.
Okay, I think I get it. The gut feeling about the project wasn't necessarily tied to the founder's gender in a predictable way.
That's a good way to put it. Now, they also brought in some theory to help explain why this might be happening. They used signal detection theory.
Signal detection theory. Okay, sounds technical. How does that fit in?
Think of it like this. An investor is trying to detect the signal, the true potential of a project amidst a lot of noise. That noise could include things like stereotypes, including gender stereotypes.
Right, things that might distract from the actual quality or potential.
Yes, exactly. Signal detection theory helps model how people make judgments under uncertainty, trying to separate that signal from the noise. The research here suggests that intuition, maybe both lay intuition and expert intuition, helps investors in this crowdfunding context focus on that signal the project's potential, regardless of the founder's gender, cutting through some of that noise.
So intuition isn't necessarily ignoring gender, but perhaps it's helping investors weigh the potential more heavily than stereotype-based assumptions.
That seems to be the implication. It helps them detect the potential for success, whether the founder is male or female.
Fascinating. Okay, so if this is what the research shows, what are the practical takeaways? What does this mean for, say, investors or the platforms themselves?
Yeah, the paper outlined several implications. First, just basic awareness for investors. Recognizing that your intuition isn't automatically a source of gender bias in this space could be empowering. Maybe trust that gut feeling about a project a bit more.
Okay, so intuition awareness. Don't just dismiss your gut. What else?
Second, for the crowdfunding platforms, it really underscores the potential value of actively promoting diversity, making sure a wide range of founders are visible.
So not just accepting diverse projects, but actively showcasing them.
Potentially, yes, because it might help tap into this intuition effect more broadly if diverse, high-potential projects are front and center. Call it platform diversity.
Makes sense. An environment that encourages seeing potential everywhere. Any other implications?
Third, it touches on education and training. Maybe investor training shouldn't just be about financial analysis. Perhaps cultivating and understanding intuition as a decision-making tool has value too, especially in uncertain early-stage ventures.
Intuition training, almost. Treating it like a skill to be honed. I like that.
And finally, platforms might want to look at their own practices. How does their interface, their rules, influence decisions? Could things like, say, time limits on viewing a pitch encourage more intuitive, potentially less biased valuations? It's about designing for fairness.
Interesting. So reviewing platform practices. This research really paints a different picture of intuition in finance, doesn't it? At least in this specific crowdfunding context.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
It challenges that narrative of intuition being inherently problematic regarding bias.
So let's just quickly summarize the core finding again for everyone listening.
Okay. The main takeaway from these 3 experiments, with nearly 3,000 people, is that women's success in reward-based crowdfunding seems linked to investors using their intuition. And crucially, that intuition doesn't appear to systematically favor male or female founders.
Right. And they measured this using both self-reports, the REI questionnaire, and that behavioral measure of quick decision-making in real crowdfunding scenarios.
Exactly. And the analysis across the board showed that intuition, however measured, didn't reliably interact with founder gender when it came to willingness to invest, even if some background gender preference existed in a context.
And the theory angle, using signal detection theory, helps frame it as intuition possibly helping investors focus on the project's potential, the signal, despite the noise of stereotypes.
Precisely, which leads directly to those practical points.
Yeah.
Investor awareness, platform diversity, the potential value of intuition training, and platforms examining their own design and practices.
It's definitely a thought-provoking study. Really makes you reconsider how bias operates or maybe doesn't operate in certain situations.
It does, and that brings us to sort of a final thought to leave listeners with.
Okay.
Given these findings from crowdfunding, this idea that intuition isn't necessarily the bias engine we assume it is, how might our understanding of bias in other areas, completely different decision-making contexts way beyond finance, be incomplete? Are we potentially missing nuances about how intuition works elsewhere because we haven't looked closely enough?
That's a great question. If intuition isn't always the villain in bias, what else might be going on under the surface in all sorts of choices we make? Definitely something to mull over.
And don't forget to subscribe to Revise and Resubmit on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And if you're enjoying the show and want to support us in creating more insightful content, consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Every contribution helps us continue this journey of exploration and discovery. Until next time, keep those minds curious, keep questioning, and keep revising and resubmitting.